Hi, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we get together on a weekly basis when Dunny's not on holiday to tackle things from the world of football and or soccer that we thought were interesting. I'm Tom Rennie. Exciting news, Week in the Tacklers. Brian Dunseth is back, and he's alongside me for today's pod. Hello, mate. You all right?
I'm good. We're back. We're healthy. We're safe. Everything was great. Like when you're on vacation and, the sickness runs through the family, it's not ideal. But we gutted through it. We got through a Christmas. We got through a New Year's Eve. And we got through sending my 16-year-old son by himself from Cabo San Lucas to Orlando with a layover in Dallas-Fort Worth, where he had to not only do customs by himself, but he had to go from Terminal D to Terminal A, which, if you've ever been to Dallas, it is not a great airport for like a transfer, international transfer. He made it down to Orlando at a great showcase. We're all back here in Salt Lake City. And for all of those parents that are in charge of laundry, which I'm the laundry person in my house.
Are you?
Oh yeah, always the laundry. I've got a day in front of me. I've got quite the day in front of me. So as soon as we got home, I'm like the preemptive strike. Let's start a couple loads before we go to bed. Even wake up in the middle of the night, like, maybe I got to go to the bathroom. I'm gonna start another load. Like, I'm that guy. So I'm about 4 loads in already since getting home last night around like 8 o'clock at night. So yeah, quite the journey. And I will say, I'll make confirmation now. I believe it's 2 times now, potentially 3 times, and I can't remember for Louis Van Gaal, but Jose Mourinho, Louis Van Gaal, and Ruben Amorim all sacked while I was away on vacation.
Wow. Every time you get a tan, a Man United manager gets sacked, in the same way that every time a bell rings, I think that's how it works. I can't be sure. It's something like that. I was worried there because you said and I know what Americans are like. I've got some exciting news for you, Danny, since the last time we spoke. I finally, 2 things I've got, and then I want to get into the top story. The first thing is, I was chatting to my nephew, as you know, is my friend who's a big football fan, right? He's my conduit into the youth. I gave him a San Diego FC shirt for Christmas, which was essentially originally meant to be for our friend Charlie Tadetano. It says El Presidente on the back. But when I got it as a gift, I was like, how am I going to get this to Charlie in New Jersey? And so, it's my nephew's now. But I said to him, do you ever, because he was thinking about doing some work experience with me and Talk Sport and Sirius. And I was like, oh, great. Have you ever seen anything that I do ever? And he was like, no, never. And I was like, we post videos on like Instagram and like Twitter and stuff. And like some of them do quite good numbers. And this show's on YouTube. Do you ever see any? He was like, are you on TikTok? And I said,
told you.
I'm not on TikTok. And he said to me, if you're not on TikTok, I've not seen it.
No.
And I was like, okay. And he was like, that's true of literally everyone in the UK. And I'm sure in America too, from like 17 and below. And in America, I'm led to believe it's like everyone's on TikTok and that's about it. So I'm on TikTok, Danny. I joined TikTok this morning for the first time ever. Tom Rennie Soccer. And I'm calling Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok Tom Rennie Soccer. Tim informed me this morning we actually have a Week in the Tackle page on TikTok, which I did not know. Till this morning. Tim maintains it, so he's done a go on there for ages. Sorry, Tim.
Nothing great.
But you can find, I was on it this morning for the first time ever. I'm led to believe it's a very dangerous social media app, and I found
I'm following.
Hey, there you go. That's the first person who's followed me, I think, because I only created it like 4 hours ago. But there you go. So, and I was how does this work then? Because I'm led to believe it's basically almost no algorithm. It's like get sent stuff. You haven't got to follow anyone to find stuff. And I found myself for 25 minutes just this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wait. Well, it's got to figure out your For You. Once it figures out your For You, you're in big trouble. But you've also opened up Pandora's box on my end, because now I will be sending you stuff that is completely irrelevant to the world of football, but really funny or fascinatingly interesting, if those are words that you can put together. Because then I will give you a little bit more insight into the mind of Dunny, third person. Sorry, Tim. But yeah, congrats, welcome. It's a whole new world, as Ariel would say.
So I'm now owned by the Chinese. I was previously owned by the Americans and Elon. So there you go.
I think you've just doubled. I don't know TikTok. I think ownership is now in American hands, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Well, I'm sure that's legit. And the other thing, the other exciting bit, is that at the very start of this series of Week in the Tackle, we did say, or I said, I was going to try and do some reaction pods, which when things happen, I'll just sit down in front of the camera and I'll give you a 10-minute monologue. Danny will try and do the same thing, and we'll do it. And then Danny has 8 jobs. I have like 5, and we didn't get around to it. But we did. But I've done one. So yesterday, when you were unable to do the show, you were traveling because you were back today for our Tuesday recording. I thought, you know what, Amorim's been sacked, and we have spent more time talking about Amorim on this show than maybe any other person. So I thought our subscribers would appreciate something immediately, and so we finally did something we promised for ages. It was like doing the dishes, and my wife finally doesn't want to leave me. I did a reaction pod. So if you want to hear my thoughts on Ruben Amorim, you can scroll back to the last show from Week in the Tackle, and you can hear a full 17-minute monologue on me talking about Ruben Amorim. So I'm not going to do too much on it today because there's a whole other podcast on it. It's Danny we want to hear from today. So let's do it. You are the slayer of Man United bosses whenever you're getting a suntan, and you have done it again. Manchester United have sacked manager Ruben Amorim with Darren Fletcher taking charge for the foreseeable future. They're having interviews with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, hilarious, Michael Carrick and Fletcher himself to potentially stay on to the end of the season, and then we'll see where we are from there. Let's get to the big story. Let's not bury the lead. Amorim is sacked. What's your reaction?
So I turned over in the middle of the night because obviously I was in Cabo San Lucas, and when I turned over, it must have been around like 2:30 in the morning. I was trying to keep an eye on my son and make sure everything was good out in Orlando. And my phone had already been lit up, and you had sent me a message, all of my football friends, the Tottenham Lunacy group, Dave in Michigan, everybody, my buddy Richie. So from like Arsenal to Liverpool to like Spurs fans, and even a couple Chelsea fans and buddies that I know. And they were like, he's done. And I was, you and I, we were still like somewhat communicating while I was down there. And I remember the day before during the press conference, you're like, he's actively trying to be sacked.
Yeah.
And so I went back and I started watching it. Excuse me.
He's gonna have a water. Hold on. He's gonna have a water. Man. Everyone pause. Everyone get ready.
That's what I need. I need a ton of water after the sessions that I put in over this trip. I'm like, by the way, side note, like I'm going on, I'm in the January dry spell for the next whatever
dry
25
Jan.
days.
Doing dry Jan.
Oh, I need to for my liver's sake. So I'm watching all of this and I'm consuming all this, and I decide before like I read the release or whatever. You know, I sit up on the couch and I decided just to go through a couple of the press conferences. And as I'm sitting there and I finally get to the release and okay, it's done and dusted, and you know, you get the weird like pseudo catwalk, perp walk outside of his residence with his wife, and he's all like lammed up and everything. I'm just thinking to myself, like, what a complete disaster this has been. Like, my first reaction is just numb. Like, I don't care. Like, I honestly was to the point where like he was fired. I don't care either way. And then I'm watching all of these, you know, subsequently these last 2 days worth of opinions on everybody on their takes of everything that they think Ruben Amorim was before he got there, is or was while he was manager of Manchester United, and currently now looking forward what his future is and what Man United's future is. I honestly, I'm to the point where I just don't even care anymore. Like, and I know that sounds weird, and I know we're supposed to be opinion based, and I know we're supposed to have these raw, hard takes, but I've literally been sitting on this for 48 hours thinking to myself, like, when I sit down with Rennie, what am I going to say? And I'm so numb to it. Like, I was so done listening to him talk. Like, I give him credit because of his honesty and transparency. But even the other day, all of a sudden, when he's closed it down, he's like, you're smart. I'm not talking about him, but you're smart. And I'm like, okay, obviously, there's been a huge bust up behind the scenes. Like, you don't go, and this was like a slow push, right? It's like, this is my system, and I'm not changing it, to all of a sudden, a couple games ago, 4 in the back, and maybe I need to think about adjusting and making sure I get the best out of these players. And I'm like, okay, someone's got to you finally. And then because you were so adamant that you were going to go down swinging in your way and like your theological approach to football itself, and now we get to the point where after the Leeds game, it was like you actually didn't play bad. Like, the goal you conceded, you fine. Like, Leeds United, I think they're actually playing really well right now in the last couple of games that I've seen. Like something's starting to click, and it was all when Daniel Farke was going to be out after that game, and then all of a sudden they've had this like good run of form, and everyone's like buying into everything. And I was like, you know what? That's actually out of all the points that have been dropped, that's the point. Like I was like, that's actually a good point in actually playing well considering the amount of players you're missing because of injury or AFCON. And so I go back and I watch again, and he's like, he's I'm the manager. No, you're literally the head coach.
Yes.
And then it's like, I've got the feeling of like I've got to have more control, and it's the recruitment part. And then I'm like, okay, so he's had a major bust up somewhere that hasn't been reported on, that he is actively trying to say, well, it. Sorry, Tim, it's them or it's me. And I was like, you don't have the equity to be making those type of statements when historically your record is one of the worst managers at man. And I know then I see these people are like, well, they're only like 2 points off of fourth place. They've been like 2 points out of fourth place for like the last 8 weeks. I mean, they have stuttered horrifically with points dropped, whether that's at home or on the road. The Everton loss to, what happened with Burnley or with Wolves the other day. So I'm indifferent, man. I got to be honest with you. I feel like this is rinse and repeat every couple of years. Ineos is a disaster. Everything that's happened behind the scenes has been a disaster. All of this talk and pomp and circumstance and puffing of the chest of we're back and this is the Manchester United way. I don't even know what the Manchester United way is. I don't know what the style of Manchester United is. They're just trying to be competitive while spending gobsmacking amounts of money in international windows. And yeah, we're right back to the same situation we were the previous 24 months ago, after we were the previous 18 months ago, after we were the previous 6 months ago, after we were the previous 24 months ago. It's rinse and repeat. And I'm now intrigued to see what the direction leads us into, whether it's short-term Darren Fletcher, short-term Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, short-term Michael Carrick, or do they go back and find, do they wait for a Pochettino until after the World Cup? Is there another manager that they're interested in? Is Xabi ready for a challenge in the Premier League? I don't know, because if you ask me right now, who's the best manager for Manchester United going forward? I have no idea who's right, because behind the scenes, I'm not convinced about the infrastructure and haven't been since the decisions from even going back to the Dan Ashworth complete disaster that's been happening. And, Sir Jim out here telling me that the club's going to run out of money and then goes and spends the money on Dorgu and drops 350 million during the summer transfer window. So, yeah, I'm more confused than having any sort of clarity after the last 48 hours that's happened to Manchester United.
A few bits on that I wanted to follow up on. Firstly, let's start with Amorim himself, who is such a fascinating character. Like,
He really is.
I find it interesting, firstly, that you said about not feeling anything about it because he's made no connection with the club or the supporters, I don't think, in that time, which I think is really interesting. That there's just, he won't be remembered, I don't think, in 5 or 6 years' time. We'll be like, oh, what was he, Ruben? What? I don't remember anything, because there's been no kind of breakout or massive moment that happened to him. But like in terms of what he has gone through in the last 14 months, the reports are that he's tried to quit on at least 2, maybe 3 occasions, and was talked off the ledge by whomever, be it Ratcliffe or Wilcox or whomever. Right, whoever the individual was that did it. And they convinced him to stay on. You go back to January of 24, where he said, this is the worst Manchester United side in history, right? Or words to that effect, which were just, at the time, was galling, absolutely galling thing for anyone to say, considering he'd been there only for like 3 months or something. But still, like, why would you ever say that? People said it was honesty. I'm not convinced honesty is the right word. There's a bluntness to it, certainly. But how honest any of this is and how much we're being manipulated, one never knows. But you go past that to the setup, and even the setup, right? The 3-4-3 thing that we've spoken about ad nauseum, and he's sticking to it. He then says, to your point from earlier, only the Pope would make me change it. Well, maybe that was Nick Pope, who plays in goal for Newcastle, because the Newcastle game, he did change it. And then when we were like, and we were on this show, one of the last shows we did, well, that's good. It's good that he's being a bit more flexible and reading the room and assessing the fact they've got injuries and problems and not the right personnel. The next game against Wolves, he just goes back to the old way, which didn't work for a long, long time. And then he does it against Leeds at the weekend until changing it in like the last 20 minutes, where again they look quite good again. When they went to a formation, I thought that
It
that made
was
a bit more
Wolves.
sense.
It was the Wolves
The
game. He
Wolves game.
flipped back to it. Yeah.
And then, like, your last 20 minutes against Leeds, he then flips it again. Like, just give me your view on him as a coach now, having seen him for 14 months. And to the wider perspective of, I want to ask you about Enzo Maresca later. I think Enzo Maresca walks into any job, more or less, in world football, give or take, some idiosyncrasies of individual clubs.
Yeah.
I don't think Amorim would get a Premier League job. I'm not sure that he would get a top job. He might well get replacing Manuel Pellegrini at Real Betis, but this has been an incredibly damaging period in time in his career, isn't it? Like, what's your view on him now?
And that's the thing, Randy. I was so excited because the first moment that he started to get linked to the Manchester United job was when he was at Sporting Lisbon, and they smashed Manchester City like 5-1, 4-1, 5-1 in Champions League. And I'm watching the system and I'm like, oh my God. Like, if he's got time with a group, then they're gonna he's this system is fantastic because as much as we try to say it's just a flat 4-3-4-3, it's not. It morphs into a lot of different shapes and moments with and without the ball and
Too many
sections of the
ideas,
play.
if anything.
What's that?
It's too many ideas, if anything, isn't it?
Well, that's the confusing part. Was because I know they had a ton of games with Europa League and the Premier League and the cup competitions. And so, I mean, and I don't know if we touched on Wilfred Nancy and Celtic and everything that went down up there, but there comes a time where the system, if you are so hell-bent on a philosophy and the system, and you are not going to change whatsoever how you play, you have to have time. You have to have a preseason. You have to allow the manager the amount of time on the grass with the players to give the nuance to the system. Not just, hey, we got 2 days and we got a game. Hey, we got another 2 games, or 2 days, we got a game. You have to have, and that was my fear about Nancy, and I don't know if we get to it, whatever. So with this, I was like, okay, he's going to get the best out of this group. There's a lot of player profiles that would fit this system. Wing backs are going to look a little bit different, but you are going to sacrifice flat out wingers, right? A left side midfielder, a right side midfielder, that's going to look completely different. There's going to be more of a hybrid of a 10. You're going to look for more of sitting, but then all of a sudden, when you're talking about that hybrids of a 10, you're going to ask for sacrifices, whether that's a Bruno or a Mason Mount. There's going to be more like for likes, and there's going to be sacrificial lambs in there. And there was. And then you get players that are frustrated and players get pushed out. And again, I have my own criticisms about the management of the personalities at Manchester United. And I didn't like the villainization of certain players to then say that this is the problem with Manchester United. No, there's individuals and there's sorry, Tim, and there's egotists in our, but I also thought that that's the job of your coaching staff to figure out ways to connect and have more of like a DNA type of relationship where you're like, hey, what was it like? Tell me about your family. Like, and that's the assistant's job to an extent. If you want to be the head coach of the manager, you want to be sorry, Tim, that's fine. But you have to have a coaching staff that can like bond the players together. You have to create an atmosphere and all that stuff. But the system itself, what I couldn't understand was why it took so long for the Manchester United players to understand what he was trying to do. Because it's not just the player profile. These players are so incredibly intelligent. You don't get that high of a level without being a good soccer. You can now listen. I've known some dum-dums, Rennie. I've known some dum-dums, like the dumbest human beings, like the Spicolis from Fast Times at Ridgemount High. Like I played with some idiots of human beings. Like they are. I mean, that why do you think maybe that's why they gravitated towards me? But like not going to survive in real life, like have no street smarts whatsoever. Yeah. But you put them on a soccer field, you put them on a football field, and it's like everything slows down and they see the game so simply. And so that's what, like as a former player who never played at that level, I got little tastes of stuff. I couldn't understand why they struggled so much to adapt to this system. Like what was it? And again, I'm a weirdo when it comes to managers. Like I'm searching up training sessions like on YouTube or TikToks or wherever. I'm going to the coach's voice and I want to see them like move pieces of the puzzle around. I want them to explain to me the nuance of their system and their identity. I can't tell you how many times I have like gone back and watched Pep Guardiola's first couple of sessions or his UAE Qatar kind of like what do they call it? Red Christmas, Bayern Munich trips down to the Middle East, where he's like physically moving Bastian Schweinsteiger and saying, "No, you must be here when the ball comes here." And like those, like the meticulous moments, like I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like thinking, I'm watching and I'm just trying to understand why there were so many breakdowns in the system that was so fluid and so clean down at Sporting Lisbon to where they could put 5 on Manchester City, and yet with better players, higher caliber players, these players couldn't figure out what that system was at Sporting Lisbon. And maybe listen, Darwin Nunez at Benfica was one of the best strikers in the modern game at that moment. Victor Gyökeres, last couple of seasons has been out. Maybe I need to reestablish where like Portuguese football lines up. And I know that sounds horrible, and people are like, yeah, bro, MLS. But like like maybe I need to readjust my thought process as I now look back and try to say like how were they so good to beat Man City the way they did? Because it wasn't a one-off. They were smashing everybody. So for Ruben Amorim, will he get a top 6 job? That'll be a pretty big risk of the board and the sporting directors to make that decision. Is he going to thrive somewhere? I absolutely think he will. I really do. And I'm really intrigued to see what his next move is. Because to your point, I could totally see him doing like a middle to upper tier La Liga team, and with more emphasis on the ball and speed of passing and dynamism off the ball in space. I could see that working. But maybe this is also the conversation surrounding Premier League football and how tight the margins are. Because, for Enzo and Ruben Amorim to vocally kind of show their disapproval and pull back the curtain just enough to let everybody know, like, hey, man, we got some happening back here. Sorry, Tim. Like, I wonder if with results and with Arne Slot and coming up with this game against Arsenal, what this looks like, considering how much success they had last year tour versus kind of the amount of spend and the sputtering that they find themselves dealing with this season. So, yeah, again, as I'm trying to find a solution in my mind, I'm not. But I know that Ruben Amorim at some point is going to have the opportunity to redeem himself, because what was it, like 36%, 38% winning of games at Manchester United, and being so adamant that his way is the right way. I sometimes think being a 40-year-old manager and having the world at his feet, like if you're so stubborn at this age, what it's going to look like going forward, there's like a weird concern for me. But yeah, I mean, Enzo, because of the Club World Cup, walks into Enzo Maresca, much different perception, because if Ruben would have won Europa League,
yeah, changed everything.
That would have changed the narrative and the conversation immediately. Enzo Maresca beating PSG 4-0 in the Club World Cup, however you want to say, made up tournament, blah, blah, blah. That right there puts him in the conversation for any of the big jobs the moment that there is an opening. And that's the gulf of the difference between the two managers.
Because it's one of those things, that tournament that appeals to CEOs, and it appeals to people who run the finances, and it appeals to the people that do the hiring. And whether
100%.
it doesn't appeal to fans is a different conversation. It's an interesting conversation, but the fans don't do the hiring. And I want to get to Maresca later, because I've got a really interesting point that Sean Derry made to me earlier that I want to put to you, which I hadn't thought of before, so I wanted to get your take on it. But just final couple of bits on Amorim, and then we won't have to talk about him again. Is and it's to another of our Sirius XM colleagues, Danny Higginbottom, who has been a very much Amorim stan. Like, if you think you've been generous to Amorim, Danny has been incredibly generous to him. And
he's a good dude, that's why.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very, very nice person. We try to be nice people. Danny's actually legitimately nice. But he's been making the point to me for a long time, which led to a clip that we posted, which was about me saying I've been on the crazy pills because he's so positive about Amorim, or generous, I like to think of it. Because I think in his heart of hearts he's realistic. But he was saying to me, and again, it's an initial reaction. He'd been sacked 20 minutes ago and we got him straight on. So I'm just bouncing off that. But he basically said there'd been improvement. He looked at the table and he was like, they're sitting 6th currently, level with points on Chelsea, 3 points behind Liverpool, X amount behind Aston Villa. So that says to me there's some sort of improvement. My argument would be, something you always say to me, on the eyeball test, have they got better? And I would argue Not really. If you watch the Wolves game or watched even elements of the Newcastle game where they won, I think there's been good moments in these games, but there were good moments under tender resignation before, so I don't know. But the other bit was the Premier League is so concertinaed right now that they are 3 points behind Liverpool, but they are only, as we speak here, 3 points above Everton, who are 12th. So to say the current league position where he got sacked is a sign that there'd been improvement, I just don't think I could have that, because there's every scenario in 2 games from now, they're sitting in 12th, depending on other results. I would say his record in the Premier League of 19 defeats and 15 wins in 47 games, the worst in their Premier League history, is catastrophic for the squad they had. Never mind the players they've brought in. I don't think anyone ever got the system. Your point earlier about why is fascinating. I can't wait to read, Bruno Fernandes' book in 5 years' time to try and explain it to us, or an interview with him now where he can finally speak a bit more freely. But I would say almost everybody got worse. Loads of guys got bombed out. He wasted 14 months of Bruno Fernandes, the tail end of his world-class career, which has been wasted for my money at Man United on a couple of pretty poor managers. And I just sort of think,
I would agree.
Can you pinpoint some improvement that anyone has made or anything has made?
Well, yeah. I mean, the improvement is that he took that squad last year and he got it to a Europa League final. I think there's, as much as we want to talk about Manchester United history or whatever being pointed out, I mean, but Champions League versus Europa League is a completely different animal. 1,000,000%. There's no doubt about it. But still navigating to a final is still navigating to a final. Yeah. So I give him credit there. Here's my problem. This is where I don't buy what's being sold on the positive side. And I love Danny. I think Danny's an extraordinary human being. One of my favorite to hang out with. You have zero competition outside the Premier League. You bombed out of the cup. You didn't qualify for Europe. So what? Teams as of right now have already played 6 games in Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League, respectively. Then you have the cup competitions where maybe another 2 to 3, depending upon the elite team. I was just going through. Gosh dang it! Why did I pull that down? I was just going through this. So when Danny was talking about the table itself, yes, technically level with 31 points with Chelsea, but they've effectively played like 8 less games than the other teams that they're competing for in the Champions League race. And on top of that, they've been dropping points left and right. It's not like they've been in a great run of form. The best run of form under Amorim was what, like September, October, when they won those 3 games in a row, and then ended up, that kid thought he was going to be able to shave his head. And then all of a sudden they drew the next 2 games. And then you have a great performance, and then you have a terrible performance. And then you're up a man with 10 minutes in the game against Everton, and somehow you end up losing. But then you'll put in a pretty solid performance. And I say solid because you end up holding on for dear life against Newcastle United. But then you're outlandishly good and bad at the same time against Bournemouth. And then you let Wolves take a dump on you. There's, and by the way, I just pulled this up. Okay, so Ahmad Mazraoui, and Buemo, those guys are gone, right? But Maguire, De Ligt, Bruno, Kobe Mainu, Mason Mount, all of those guys. How many guys do you have out? Whether that's because of injury and or class of personality or international duty, he's talking about, the team's watered down. The same criticism that I've had about Manchester United this year is the same criticism I have for teams that are suffering horrific amounts of injuries at this time of year when you're only in a single competition. What is happening at training each and every week that these guys are breaking down when you have 1 game a week?
Yeah.
1 game a week. You're telling me these are world-class superstar football players, and I know world-class is used generously. Bruno Fernandes is the one player in this group that's outlandishly successful and consistent. But how do you have this many injuries when you're having 6 days in between games? I feel for some of the other teams that are going through injuries, that are dealing with it, and the roster size is humongous because they know they have multiple competition. Manchester United had one focus. Yeah. And even in that time, how do you look like you can't get up for a Wolves game when potentially the full 3 points in your back pocket puts you in a top 4 spot? Legitimately, you're sat in a top 4 spot when everybody's played the equal amount of games. So there's so many more questions than answers. And again, it just shows the disconnect that's been happening. And by the way, it infuriates me when all of these local beat writers that have been covering the team have been sitting on all of this information so they could have all of the angles and all the first questions to all of the press conferences. And then they could get the little tidbits of information, the tit for tat and the trading sessions that are happening, because all of this is complete dog. Sorry, Tim. When something happens and the canaries in the coal mine start singing, and then you get this like 5 minute scroll of an article that's on some website that tells you all of the things that have been, categorized throughout the time of a manager to let us know exactly what's happening. And this is why this happened, and this is why this happened. That just print it when you have it. Like, stop using it as leverage. And I get it, it's a business, but
Save
it just,
it for
I
your
read,
book, mate. You got to save it for your book.
I read it the other day, Rennie, and I'm like, well, why didn't you tell us this was happening? Why didn't you write? Why didn't you report this? Oh, it's because you didn't want to lose your access. Oh, you didn't want to lose the relationship. Oh, you wanted to be able to ask the first 3 questions at the presser on a Thursday night. It, I was so pissed.
Yeah.
See, I went from apathetic to like now angry. Thanks a lot, Rennie.
We've got you. We've got you there. We've got you there. I mean, on that, I mean, I know where people do it. Everyone knows what they do it. That's, you've got to make sure you've always got something every day, and people are writing books for the future, and they're saving stories for their own exclusives. And like everyone knew about the row with Jason Wilcox on Friday, going into the press conference before Leeds. Everyone knew about that, but no one was saying Wilcox and Amorim had a stand-up row before the game, which is why he was so pissed during his pre-weekend press conference, which is why, having basically known he was getting the sack, he lost his mind on Sunday, but then he kind of gave the game away to, I obviously texted you about it when I'd seen it. Listen, 2 other real quick bits, and I want to ask you about Maresca and Nancy before we're out of time today. Firstly, I do think it's quite interesting to your previous point about when we spoke on our last pod together 2 weeks ago about Kobbie Mainoo's brother and the T-shirt. I'm thinking about that in a different context.
100%.
How much Kobbie Mainoo knew, how much his, I think, half-brother or whatever knew in the free Kobbie Mainoo T-shirt, and whether he knew the freedom was coming soon, because Mainoo, by the way, has been quote-unquote injured since then, and was unavailable for Leeds with, I think they said, toe injury or something, which is interesting.
He's on the grass and he's training. Oh, he's going to be in the squad, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, 100%.
What about the story about Lisandro Martinez and Ruben Amorim allegedly squaring up on one another in training? Like, report it, you bums.
Yeah,
Sorry.
now. And the other bit was, I'm just reading as we're recording this about Antoine Semenyo about to complete his move to Manchester City. Everyone has known about his move to City for a while and his release clause that's available until the 10th of Jan or something like that. So he's been speaking to loads of clubs. One was Manchester United. And someone told me this story, which I thought was quite interesting, that Man United made their pitch to Semenyo.
Yeah.
And again, I get this from someone I think would know. But that's all I'll tell you for now. But they would know this, so I think it's good information. And they basically said the pitch from Amorim was, and we see you playing as a wing-back. Semenyo was a bit like, okay, it was an interesting angle. He then goes to a further conversation with what I would presume to be Jason Wilcox, potentially even Ratcliffe, but I think it's Wilcox, who then says, well, we see you on the front left, because you play front left, and we're going to do 4-3-3. And he's like, oh, but isn't Ruben Amorim staying, and he's not going to change his formation? And this goes back maybe a month or 6 weeks, maybe further. So the future planning was he's going to go. Kobbie Mainoo's brother seemed very confident that he could just slag off the manager publicly, and then a couple of weeks later he's gone. So I do think what happens it is going to be really interesting what comes out now, and it's all flooding out now, by the way.
Well, yeah, and in the article, one of those articles was saying that even in the summer, Semenyo, they didn't like the valuation from Bournemouth, and Bomo was like 60, and then it ended up at 65. Then it ended up with add-ons like +6, so it ended up actually being more than Semenyo, and so that has to do. And again, these are all the things that you and I judge between the white lines for 90 minutes, and then we try to take these little bits and pieces and put them together like this extraordinary puzzle, and then when we subsequently find out afterwards all of these things that have happened, you're like, oh yeah, no. Like, no wonder. Sorry, Tim. No wonder. I gotta stop. No wonder why I've been gone. I'm just making up for the difference. Yeah. No wonder why things were so bad. No wonder why. And then it's like, well, here's a screen cap of this player saying, "All the best, Mister. I appreciate you." And why didn't this guy do it? And then all of a sudden, like, I don't know if this was true or who knows now. Like Garnacho, it was like the the handcuffs were broken and free, and you're like, wait, what? And again, these moments, right? These all of these little moments matter. So yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see. Even now, the pressure for Wilcox. By the way, subsequently, a side note, I would when moments like this have the balls to step out publicly
Oh, 100%.
and explain to us what. So at least the one thing here in the U.S. is like when a manager gets fired, the sporting director, the general manager, or the president of soccer will have to step up to the dais, sit down, and have a conversation with the local media members and explain why exactly things went sideways. You don't get to hide behind a tweet. You don't get to hide behind a statement. You come out and tell us exactly what went wrong and why you're going in a different direction. And I just think it's cowardly not to do something like this. I think it's cowardly not to have the chones to come up and say, like, hold on a second. This is the reason why we've made this decision. We respect the manager. We respect his staff. We wish him all the best, but this was untenable and this is why it was untenable. And then you move on. But I know you guys do it a little bit differently over there.
No, but we do it wrong, frankly. 1,000%. I've seen this quite a lot from people who cover Italian football, American football, soccer, and German football. They all have sporting directors or front of house people who will come out and are accountable. And they should all, if we're going to go for this model in the UK, like Forest, we should be hearing from Edu, and at Arsenal, we should be hearing from Barada, and for West Ham, we should be hearing from David Sullivan, sadly. And whomever else he decides to put in charge of transfers for 25 minutes before sacking them. Like, they should all be talking publicly, which it's ridiculous that we haven't heard from Jason Wilcox and he hasn't been answering questions.
Side note, by the way, your Twitter handle has been aggressive towards West Ham lately.
Yes, I sat through the first half of West Ham Wolverhampton Wanderers, and I'm pretty sure that I only wish I was on the same lithium that Nuno seemed to be on. That I could have sat there comatose like a monged out freak like Nuno did for the entirety of the game. And I would have put my phone down, but sadly I was engaged, which would have been nice from the manager. Anyway, look, let's move on because I want to get to a question on Liam Rosenior and then something on Wilfried Nancy to close because I want to get your take on the chaos there. And he's been dealt a poor hand, Nancy, in lots of ways, but
timing.
Bloody hell did he play it very, very badly. So we'll get to that. But in terms of Liam Rosenior, I'd love to get your take on this. So I think we've spoken since Enzo Maresca has left, and I think that you're in a scenario now where it just seemed untenable, and he decided to quit in the end to not work with the Blue Co model anymore. But there's loads of great elements to this that I want to get your angle on. In brief, Liam Rosenior has gone to Strasbourg. Strasbourg is owned by Blue Co, and they are being treated very much like a vassal state. They are very much being treated like as a subordinate club, and they are feeding into Chelsea. Now, there's a really interesting angle that Sean Derry put to me earlier on Sirius XM FC, which was, well, there's a few interesting bits. I'll do that bit first. He was basically saying he wonders if Strasbourg win the Conference League this year under our friend Gary O'Neill, who's going to be the new manager there, and used to work with Sean at Wolves, of course. If they were to win the Conference League and finish in the top 6 in Liga, I don't know enough about Liga, I'm sure you don't either, but would there be an acceptance from the fan base of being this vassal club if they also had success on the side as a feeder club for Chelsea? I'd love your view on that. And there's also just an element to this too. The Strasbourg Supporters Federation have asked for Mark Keller, who saved the club years ago and is now president under Blue Co, to leave because they are not happy, it would seem, being this vassal club for Chelsea. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's part of the modern game and what we're seeing. There's an ugliness to it, and that is when you have these monster clubs, and I do believe Chelsea is in that category of monster clubs, and you have the backing and you have these ownership groups. What inevitably is starting to happen is the footballing umbrella continues to expand, become broader, and you look at it as kind of a dual sporting model and a business model. And the reality is, it is at times more of a business model than it is a sporting model. And if you're a Chelsea fan, like, you don't give a flying squirrel. You're like, great, man. We can continue to buy all of the best young players. We can then effectively park them at certain clubs, let them develop as much off the field as on the field. Culturally, language-wise, let them toughen up a bit. and then get them adapted to a certain style of European football. This isn't the first nor the last. The only thing that's different is the ownership model. How many times we've seen it done with agents, how many times we've seen, and I'm just randomly throwing out clubs here, but like a Shakhtar Donetsk or a Benfica, like those type of models where they'll go and they'll raid different countries for their best and most dynamic young players. They'll overpay probably to then bring them over. They'll get them on the field. They'll give them experience of Europa League or Champions League football. And then we will watch them succeed and then be purchased by Premier League clubs for 50 times the value of what they had previously paid. So the idea of what's happening is nothing new. The only difference is there's margins being played that are still within the gray area that are acceptable by FIFA, UEFA, and all of the decision makers when it comes to players moving around to different clubs. The pride of Strasbourg, and I'm naive completely to the bigger conversation because I don't watch Liga football. I've not watched Strasbourg. I've only read the articles. I've only been made aware of what's happening. I've seen the protests. I've seen the anger. I've seen the frustration. Even watching this with the kind of movement and what was happening, I was actually kind of surprised that there wasn't an adjustment or a move or a conversation for Eric Ramsey out at Minnesota United, considering his time at Chelsea Football Club and kind of the trajectory of his managerial career, that he wouldn't be maybe in the conversation for Strasbourg. But Gary O'Neill, I think is I'm intrigued to see how he does and how quickly he adapts. But if you're a Strasbourg fan, I can totally understand where you're saying, get the fuck out of my club. Sorry, Tim. Like, what are you doing? Like, I don't want these players. Like, I want the DNA. I want I want that identifiable. This is my club. We are a standalone club. We live, we breathe, we die by everything that happens for our club. I don't want to get picked clean all the time by a club that theoretically doesn't give a flying squirrel about us whatsoever, about what happens. So, yeah, I'm again fascinating. It's fascinating to continue to see the evolution of football, both on the field and off the field, and how horrifically painful it can feel like if you are not the big club, you are the feeder club. Because I've seen, how deep do I want to go on this? I've seen situations where there's been investment and or there's been complete ownership of clubs that have then fallen underneath a footballing umbrella of an ownership group or an investment arm that has been sold under the guise of this is beneficial for everybody. And we will develop, we will sell, we will purchase, we will loan, we will transfer, we will continue to build the model. And this will be our blah, blah, blah footballing way. And it's all bull. Sorry, Tim. It's everything that nothing was ever beneficial.
No, they have a favorite kid, always.
There's always the favorite. And then it's like, well, if I buy that player, will it piss off that group of fans? And well, we own that club and this league. And if we buy that player, are we inadvertently strengthening that club as opposed to strengthening our own club? What's the board going to think? What are the voting members going to think? And it becomes, it doesn't become as beneficial as one would believe when it's being sold. It's really overall just an investment arm, and you're playing long-term gains. So especially in France, when it's such a, and I say this with the utmost respect, it's such a tribalism. It's such a tribalism for your club each and every day. Yeah, if I was a Strasbourg fan and I didn't like what was happening, I'd only be much more frustrated with the situation.
And I think the fact there's no money in it means that the tribalism is higher because it's more of a game for everyone. And unfortunately, there is a real violence problem in France in general, which we'll maybe get to another time. Last bit on this, and then I want to do Nazi, right? So I just wanted to put this to you because I thought it was really interesting. We're talking about Liam Rosenior, who's got the job, and I know people that know Liam Rosenior really, really well, and they're full of praise for him. He's very bright, very clever, was a very good analyst when he was on TV over here, and has done a really good job at Strasbourg in the conditions he was given, and I think was unlucky to get sacked at Hull when he left. But there is a narrative doing the rounds in the content mines, where I am every day, where he's not big enough for Chelsea. Chelsea have had Ancelotti, and they've had Mourinho, and all these incredible names. And the reason, and this was my point earlier, and that's why Enzo Maresca failed with the fans at Chelsea, because he wasn't a big enough name. And the point Sean Derry made was, doesn't think Enzo Maresca was a failure at Chelsea? Bluco. Bluco will say, we found this manager, he wasn't expensive, we asked him to work within our model, deliver a couple of trophies, get us back into the Champions League, and he basically did all of those things.
Yeah.
And then he decided now that this was the end of that run. But it's not been an acrimonious split. There was a couple of bad press conferences, but in general, there'll be handshakes all round. He'll move on, they'll move on. And he delivered the FIFA Club World Cup and delivered the Conference League as requested and get back into the Champions League. And they will think Enzo Maresca was a roaring success for them. So why wouldn't they have the confidence in bringing Liam Rosenior in? Because he is the next in their line. And when they bring in Gary O'Neill in 2 years, and then Felipe Luis, I hear, in 2 years after that, then that will be the planned out model, and they'll think, yeah, this is great for us. And I think that was really interesting.
Yeah, I was actually surprised they didn't make a run at Felipe Luis, considering he was just in contract renegotiations. And he was excellent in the FIFA Club World Cup, and the run that he just had in Libertadores was really impressive. The only thing with Liam is the length of the contract as the sun kind of comes over the mountain. The 5.5 year deal, I believe he's what, 41, 42?
41, yeah.
Okay, so I'm naive to his time because I wasn't a whole City fan nor paying attention to what was happening. And again, I'm catching up like 99% of the other people are with regards to what he's done before getting this opportunity. 41 years of age, 5.5 year deal. That'll give him effectively 5 more seasons after this. He seems. I just watched his presser, his goodbye presser, effectively, and he was talking about the opportunity that he had, the job that he did, that he gave his heart and soul, and he hopes that the level of performance stands on its own for his work over at the club. And now the opportunity, and by the way, pointing out, and something we forget about, sacrificing the time with his children because they stayed back in England while he was in France. And that's for any of us that have children. I couldn't even imagine being away from my kids for that long. But he seems incredibly intelligent. Like just watching the way that he uses his words, 100%. Like I think he's going to do great in his press conferences. And I'm intrigued to see how he handles the pressure of what the media and the fan scrum looks like around him. But I would agree with you. The most important thing for him right now is going to be the presence that he creates in front of these players. Because God forbid, at his very first player meeting, or it's going to take a couple of sessions where the players will know immediately if he's the real deal. They'll know immediately. And if he's not the real deal, they'll suss him out, and it will be very difficult for him to get them on side. Because now you're dealing with a couple of players that are incredibly talented, like incredibly talented. You're dealing with a couple players that have won a lot of big trophies. You're dealing with a lot of players that have way more money than you do. And you're dealing with a couple of players that age-wise are in a similar category to where you find yourself as a human being off the field as well. So all of these things, you're going to have to prove very quickly. And I say this all the time. And I've talked about, we even going back to the Bob Bradley days when he first got his opportunity. However you choose to go about this, it's going to be shirt up over the face and be like, oh, this fucking guy. Sorry, Tim. Like this guy. Like, come on. And there'll be looks. There'll be eye rolls. There'll be the WhatsApp group conversations. There'll be the boot rooms. There'll be the massage tables. There'll be the warm up. There'll be the cool down. There'll be in the training session. They'll be in lifting weights. There will be a conversation. And by the way, whoever gets dropped, whoever's not a part of what he's trying to do will be the first that will be the group that potentially spoils what's happening behind the scenes and what's happening on the ground. So this is going to be really, really, really fascinating to see how he manages this. And as you start talking, I'm going to close my shades.
And just on the fan element of it as well, the thing for him is going to be to prove that he's not a Blue Coast stooge, which is going to be a different.
Oh yeah, 100%
as well.
Yeah.
Right, and that leads us to our final bit today that I wanted to ask you about, and that was about Wilfried Nancy's calamitous 33 days at Celtic, which have come to an end. Martin O'Neill, by the way, back in charge. His interim time in charge was longer than Wilfried Nancy's permanent time in charge. It was truly catastrophic. The players weren't having him. The fans weren't having him. Rod Stewart wasn't having him, and he didn't have much of a chance after the loss in the Old Firm at the weekend. And they had given a little bit more of a go. Still not enough, nowhere near enough, obviously. But he can't lose the Old Firm with the reputation that he's currently got there. And I want to read you a paragraph from a piece by Tom English in the BBC. He's their Scotland chief sports writer. And then just to get your take on this whole sorry mess. And I will add that I think Wilfried Nancy has handled everything very badly during his time there. I do think he's a very good coach, but I think that 7-minute answer he gave a couple of weeks ago was, again, going to our previous conversation, there'll be something that happened before that that led to that we don't currently know. But anyway, this paragraph is... Nancy's appointment was one of the greatest blunders Celtic have made in their entire history. A relative rookie on a bad run with Columbus Crew, they finished 7th in Major League Soccer. It was a punt based on little more than the hipster vibes of Paul Tisdale, the now former head of football operations. So I just wanted to read you that bit. The article follows in that similar vein. And I'm guessing you might have found some of that triggering. I don't know. But give us your view on, whatever way you slice this, it's bad for everybody.
Yeah, listen, full disclosure, I've worked with Wilfried Nancy in my broadcasting duties, going back to his first year at manager at CF Montreal when I was covering him for ESPN. So that would have been 5 seasons ago, 5 seasons, something like that. I am incredibly appreciative of who he is as a human being and the insight, the footballing insight that he afforded me to understand kind of his system. And to the point where I'm asking about shape and movement and all identity, to the point he's got to be like, dude, I don't want to talk to you about this. But he was great. So I have a soft spot for Wilfried Nancy. And if I look back at this last season, and really since the loss of Cucho at Columbus, there was a decline that was happening that started with the departure of Tim Bezbatchenko at Columbus Crew. And when Bezbatchenko left to be a part of the Bournemouth group, the Bournemouth leadership group on the footballing side, a guy named Issa Tall, his assistant, kind of took over and jumped up and was really intrigued to see how this was going to happen because the timing and the mechanisms and the movement in Major League Soccer is a little bit different, right? And so Cucho leaves, Abu Ali comes in, and he had a great, FIFA Club World Cup group stage, but then there's timing and paperwork and all these things that happen. And in the meantime, Wilfried Nancy and losing Aidan Morris and the heart and soul alongside Darlington Nagbe, the announcement Darlington Nagbe was retiring at the end of the season, injuries, lack of performance in the competitiveness in the Eastern Conference, all of these things ended Columbus not having a great year. Competitive, but in the hierarchy of Eastern Conference strength, the Cincinnatis and the Philadelphias and the Inter Miamis, all of this, they weren't great. And when you compared and contrasted player names on the back of the jerseys, there was a little bit more of an understanding of what was happening, but still not great. But I was always looking at Wilfried Nancy as the manager because of background, because this is work rate, because of the success he'd had in Major League Soccer at both clubs, that this was going to be a guy that was going to be given an opportunity at some point. And I remember when the links first started with Glasgow Celtic, having trained at Glasgow Rangers for those 4 months back in 1997, seeing 3 Old Firm derbies, seeing the strength of Rangers at the time with Gaza and Ali McCoist and everybody that was there, Rino Gattuso. It was Barry Ferguson, Ian Durant, all those guys. It was an amazing, amazing experience. And Henrik Larsson at the time was at Celtic, and it was like the strength of Scottish football, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I remember I went to like an under 16 Old Firm match, and like the fandom was like I'd never felt it the same way, right? Because they were kicking the crap out of each other. It was
Yeah, I
wild.
bet they were.
Oh man, there was like in the jarring and the fans, and it was incredible. So I knew even where Scottish football is now versus then, you know, however many years, 30 years later, um, it's just a different animal. And when Brendan Rodgers left and Martin O'Neill came in, and he's like the warm blanket of football. Like anytime you hear him speak, you're just like, what a good guy. Like that guy's been through all of it. He's seen it. Whether you liked his success or hated his success, like that guy knows football. He knows how to manage players. Like he's got that old school way. He's going to dumb it down. Let's simplify it. Let's just keep the game in front of him. Let's play to our offensive strengths. Let's play for pride. Let's play for Celtic. Like you knew he was going to be successful. And then the timing happened. And the announcement that Wilfred Nancy was like probably going to take over. And I looked at the schedule, and my first instinct is why? Why? Like, why take the club? Like, why take control of the club right now? Like, my first instinct was get through the old firm and then let him take over because he doesn't have enough time. Like the way he plays, his style, he's so philosophical. And by the way, that's who he is. Like he is genuinely one of the most fascinating managers to listen to because I don't think, and again, now perspective, they got smashed, right? They lost 6 of 8 games, I believe, 1-1, all that stuff. It was horrific failure.
The St. Mirren Cup final was a killer. That was a
yeah, and it was understood. It was understood. Anyone can understand why he was let go. Totally get that. I'm not arguing more time because results matter. And especially in the hotbed of the public opinion and results, he was never going to last. But I kept thinking to myself, like, why take these games? Like, there's not enough time, not with the way that you play, not with the way that you want to play. Like, you need a run of games where there's at least a week in between some of these games, not this really conflicted, winter timeline. So I'm not surprised. Egotistically, it's another huge blow for managers that have tried to quote unquote be American or come from Major League Soccer and try to open the door for themselves and for managers that have had success in Major League Soccer. Whether you're talking about Bob Bradley, whether you're talking about Jesse Marsh, whether now you're talking about Wilfred Nancy, the moment that any American manager is linked with a somewhat high-profile job going over to Europe, continental Europe, that they're going to be like, no chance, no chance. But as I say that, Pellegrino Matarazzo just got Sociedad, and I'm really intrigued to see how he does in San Sebastian because he's American, and yet his footballing career started over in Germany in terms of managing as opposed to starting in Major League Soccer. And that's why he was one of the names linked to the U.S. men's national team job before Mauricio Pochettino ended up getting it. And there's like a bigger conversation somewhere down that line. So yeah, man, not a good look. And I totally I feel bad for him because I think he is a good dude and I think he is a good manager, but I totally understand why the decision was made because the results do matter, and it was worthy of him being sacked after such a short amount of time.
Yeah. I wonder where he goes next, Wilfred Nancy, and I hopefully he'll take a holiday and not do what Nuno did and take a job in 25 minutes without his staff and nobody wants to have him there and he doesn't want to do the job. That'd be nice. But we'll see. We'll see what he does. Maybe Strasbourg would have been a good job for him, but there we go. That seems to be taken. Columbus Crew would have been a good job, but he got sacked 5 days too late, sadly. What a blow. Anyway, Danny, we are out of time. Good to see you, mate. Thank you very much.
Same, bro.
They turned the lights off on me, which means I have to end the show. Otherwise, I'd do this in the dark. I just can't. I've put on too much Christmas weight, frankly.
Me too.
There'll be another week in the tackle next week, we hope. That's Brian Dunseth. I'm Tom Rennie. Subscribe on Spotify. Subscribe on Apple. Subscribe on YouTube. Find me on Tom Rennie Soccer on TikTok. Like the teenagers. The Tickety Tock Talks. See you next time. Thanks, everyone.